This is Karen with NewClevelandRadio.net, and it is time for the Intentionality Gurus with Candace Pollock. And today, now listen carefully, we're talking about BHAGs versus behaviors. So when I said the word BHAGs, I have a picture of some really witchy people out there. Did I catch you on that one?
You did. Because the picture I have is like, Sasquatch, a big hairy
yeah,
or something like that. But BHAGs stand for big, hairy, audacious goals. And for as long as I can remember, just in the circles I hang out in, we were always encouraged to create these big, audacious, hairy goals. And the thought was that this would pull us forward. We'd be so excited about accomplishing these goals, we could just ride on their coattails and it would pull us forward and we would be, successful, however we might define that. And the term actually comes from some research and writing that Jim Collins did. He was an author of Good to Great and a number of other books. And basically he identified certain things that made really good companies, and we're talking about large corporations, into great companies. So something like Westinghouse versus GE or something. And so there's good companies, and then there's those that really distance themselves from the pack. But B.J. Fogg, who is one of my favorite researcher, lecturer, writer about habits, he wrote Tiny Habits. He's was a researcher and lecturer at Stanford, has shown evidence-wise that it's the behaviors that really get us where we want to go. Okay, so we happen to talk about behaviors a lot. So as the normal citizen, we can do big, hairy, audacious goals, something that, I want to climb Mount Everest, although I've never really understood that whole concept. The cold just would get to me. And I don't want the tip of my nose to, get frostbitten and fall off. So while it's great to name something, very audacious, when we think about accomplishing it, we have to couple it with other things. And one of the fuel for the goals is the behaviors. Motivation alone is going to peter out, and it won't sustain us. And the science is, proven that it's like willpower. It's finite, and the more we try and leverage it and tap into it, the less it can sustain us. So can you think of something really big that you set for yourself that didn't pan out?
I'm sure there's been plenty of those situations in my life, but not one comes to mind right now.
Well, I had one. So way back in the day, I used to row, and I had a rowing machine. I still have the rowing machine. It's from the 90s. And I got it into my head a couple of years ago that I wanted to participate in the Crash Bee Sprints, which is a competition on rowing machines in Boston every year. And so I kind of made that a goal. And then I would get on my bike from time to time, not my bike, my erg machine, and from time to time. And I don't think I had stumbled across BJ Fogg at that point. So I didn't structure the behaviors around accomplishing that. And then I injured my back again, unrelated to that. I slipped on some wet leaves, and when you kind of like jerk your back, and I was laid up for quite a bit. And then, so that took me, out of the equation. So that big, hairy, audacious goal, in my age class and so on, I looked at other people's times. I figured, okay, I need to work out and do certain things, but that was it. It was just audacious, right? Now, if I had known what I know now, I would have structured and if I hadn't injured my back, I would have structured my habits, my daily habits, in order to support that goal. So that might have looked like get to bed early, get up early. After I do certain chores in the morning, like feed the creatures and, other things, then I would go to the basement and sit on the erg and do a workout. And then I would have all of those things planned out. Seems rigorous, but those are the systems to support the habit.
Got it.
So anything else, stand out for you?
Well, I think you and I offline have talked about this, that um, I had created a habit that every morning when I would go downstairs to make my coffee, I would do push-ups up against the kitchen counter.
Mhm.
And then I did it for a week or so, and then I didn't do it. And it was like, why aren't I doing it? Because I really want to and need to. But I stopped doing it because for a week or so, I stopped making coffee in the morning. So it didn't connect, that, that behavior wasn't there. And you made a suggestion. You said, well, how else could you think about doing this? And I then started connecting it with me coming downstairs in the morning. So whether I'm making a cup of coffee, getting water, whatever, when I come downstairs and I'm facing my kitchen, I then would go in and start doing my push-ups up against the counter. So I didn't have to connect it to coffee, but I connected the behavior and the concept. To me, if I kept doing this, I was going to tighten up my arms, and get better upper body strength.
And be
And
smarter
yeah.
and be brilliant and,
Oh, absolutely.
but it worked while you did it, correct?
It worked while I did it. And now it's working because when I come downstairs, I know it's something that I want to do. And I would say 5 out of 7 mornings, that's what I do.
And do you celebrate it when you do it?
Yes, because I'm usually very, very tired at that point of the day. And it sort of invigorates me. And so my celebration is, hey, I'm awake. Now, what else can I do? What else is on my agenda? So, yeah.
I love it. I love it. So this is a perfect example. So if you had just declared this for yourself, I want to do these, counter push-ups, and not have created the little ritual that has that occur, what is the outcome you might have gotten?
Well, like I said, when I stopped doing it because I wasn't making coffee, um, I was sort of beating myself up. It was like, oh, I was supposed to do that. Why didn't I do that? But I had no connection for it at that point.
And when you beat yourself up, I'm going to hazard a guess here that in time, it becomes a futile goal. Like, why bother?
Yeah, to some degree it was that, but it was also, you can do it, but so why aren't you doing it? Are you too lazy? And I was coming up with internally with all these excuses why I wasn't doing it. And I think that the things that I do the best really are things that I've created habits for in doing. And I try to find enjoyment out of all of them.
Yeah, exactly. So BJ Fogg talks about, creating the little recipe, the anchor behavior that you reliably do. So you reliably come down the stairs. You didn't reliably make coffee because you gave
Right.
it up for a while. All right. And then you couple that with behavior, the desired behavior, but in the tiniest step. So it was just, to go to the counter. It's not like you're going to do like 3 sets of push-ups
Right.
or something. And then you celebrate. And the reason we have to celebrate, it could be just a little mental fist pump, or just saying, sometimes I'll actually pat myself on the back or on the shoulder and say, atta girl can. But the point of the celebration is to trigger a little dopamine hit in your brain. And then the brain knows, oh, this human seems to like that. Let's do that the next time the
Right.
sequence occurs. And so so it has to be tiny, and then coupled, as I said, with the celebration. But he also has this whole approach about motivation and impact. And it's so if you think of a matrix, like a vertical line, arrow up and down,
Yep.
and one that's horizontal. The top of the vertical would be high impact, the bottom would be low impact. And then the horizontal line to the left would be hard to do, and to the right, it would be easy to do. And so when we look at whether we are doing something that's hard and low impact in terms of success, those are the ones that we're going to struggle with the most. I mean, it kind of is obvious.
Right.
But as it gets closer to the middle of the matrix, this is where it can be in kind of gray area, but we can pay attention to it. And the quadrant where it'll be easiest for us, where it's high impact, but it's easy to do. So that would, your push-ups on the counter would qualify in that quadrant.
Okay.
All right. So when we think about, the big, hairy, audacious goals, I mean, in the coaching I've had over the years, just in my profession, and there's a lot of, competition for like how audacious you can be, like really crazy stuff. And then everybody claps like, oh, that's so cool, but then we don't get back to the story later to say, well, did you actually do anything towards
Right.
that?
Yeah.
It's just in the moment you're getting lauded about it. I always found that interesting, but it had no science behind it. Hadn't discovered BJ Fogg at the time. But just with the idea of, rather than having our motivation work against us, because we're not going to want to do hard things. I mean,
Right.
maybe you do, but
No, not really.
I don't tend to. And I would prefer not to do futile things, so low impact things. I certainly have done my share of those, like, watching YouTube videos and, whatever, that are not cat videos, but maybe not too far from that. So can you think of any low impact things that you have to do that kind of drain your energy, your motivation?
Yeah, keeping my house in order. um, you know, one activity that really just drives me crazy really is cooking. I used to love to cook. But I have, at the end of the day, I just have no motivation or desire to do it. Uh, I will because I feel like I have to. But I will say, after experiencing some things over the last couple of days, that I realize uh, I don't always have to do certain things or agree to certain things, that maybe I can find a different way to not be so angst against cooking.
So it sounds like cooking might be considered a should more often than not.
Yes, absolutely.
And if it's a should, where would that show up on the matrix? Hard to do, easy to do, low impact, high impact.
Very low impact. I do it because, like you said, I have to do it.
Which is debatable, quite frankly, but
well, when you say it's debatable, in some ways you're right. It either means that I hear the wrath of my family, like, really, you
you're not
don't
feeding.
know what to make for dinner. I'm hungry. And it's also learned behavior from my mother. My mother never complained about making a meal. And so there's sometimes I think, hey, what is wrong with me? But I think I'm going to look at that differently.
What do you mean by that?
That I don't have to take the burden on, even though I've done it since my first marriage on. It's like, oh, well, isn't it the woman's job to grocery shop, cook meals, clean up? And I think when I was younger and I had my kids to cook for, it probably was a little bit more fun because I was um, cooking cooking much differently than I do today. Today it's like, you know, what's the easiest thing that we can make and that all of us will eat.
Yeah, kind of a means to an end, like a
Yep.
necessity, but the thrill isn't there, the fun isn't there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I, grew up in a family where cooking was just something that was done, but it wasn't that my mother didn't like it. It's just that, it was just perfunctory.
Yep.
And so, we often would have, casseroles and, it was just the era. And I never really learned how to cook, but then later I had to learn how to cook. And I noticed a distinct pattern that when I had the time, the luxury of time, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I
But when
agree
I
there.
was
Yeah.
pressed for time, it was something I loathed. And in fact, since my husband passed away, I'm a one ingredient meal person.
Okay.
So I eat to live. I don't to live to eat, that kind of thing. But looking at it in terms of motivation and time and those kinds of things, another element that BJ Fogg has is, what's our ability, what's our time, our motivation, and a number of other things, and all of those enter into it. So, and then we've been trained, I'm talking about women as a rule, although I know that that's a broad statement, to our role can be defined by others in terms of, what's expected.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that's going to be a hard thing to overcome. Unless
Yep.
you want to revolt.
Well, it's like, and my husband will say this to me often. He'll say, you created a habit for me. And that is, the habit for him is that he sort of expects that, I'm going to cook because it's what I've done all these years. And he's not a demanding person as to, that he has to have a 3 or 4 or 5 course meal. It's like, give me a piece of chicken and I'll just be happy. But sometimes to me, that piece of chicken that's in the freezer that needs to be thawed, that needs to be cooked, it just becomes such a chore. Now, if in the morning I decide, hey, I'm going to take out chicken and I'm going to prep it for tonight, then I don't mind doing it.
So if you were to create a habit chain around that, the prompt, the anchor, and the tiny behavior
Mhm.
and the celebration, what might it look like? I'm not saying you have to do this.
Yeah.
Because it's, he's like volunteered you for this.
Um, if I would do that on a regular basis, it probably would take a lot of the stress out of me, and I may not look at it so much as a chore, because right now it's a chore if I don't do anything until 6 o'clock at night
Got it.
when everybody's hungry.
Yep. Yeah, you're against the deadline.
Right.
So what about a behavior chain, a behavior recipe that could be beneficial?
Most likely tying it into when I come down the steps and I do my push-ups and I feel invigorated, um, to go out to the garage and pull something out of the freezer and, know that I have all day long to create this prep. Um, and I'm not up against a deadline.
So am I hearing an obligation here?
No, because it's something that I need for myself as well. So it's not like I'm just doing it for my husband and my son. I'm also doing it for myself.
And if you were to do that on a regular basis, I'm not volunteering you
Yeah.
either, but if you were to do it, what bigger goal, not, it doesn't have to be a hairy, audacious goal, would that serve?
Um, I'd be more relaxed at dinner time than I normally am. It wouldn't be like at the last minute, either making something or deciding that we should go out to get something to eat or bring something in. That that part of my daily life um, sort of destroys a lot of the good things that have happened during the day.
Mhm, mhm. It's,
And
like a
right,
cap on the day that kind of colors everything.
right.
Yeah.
And I will admit the days that I do that early prep, take something out of the freezer and know that, you know, sometime during the day, um, these are the things I'm going to be fitting in. It doesn't seem as stressful. So there's a benefit,
Yeah, so shoehorning it in at the end of the day when you want to coast into relaxation, I presume,
right?
because you wear many hats, with the podcast and other things that you're doing. So it's just something to look at. But
Yep.
I think it reinforces the idea that you could declare that I want to cook dinner every night for my family because whatever reason you might want to do it, but that doesn't fuel the behavior. It doesn't
Right.
get you to the outcome. It's the behaviors and that tiny habits formula that BJ Fogg came up with, which I personally think is brilliant. Well,
It
thank
is.
you, my little guinea pig. You have navigated another habit
Yeah.
recipe.
And it probably could be a very good habit. Um, Again, as I'm walking through this, I see myself at the end of the day um, feeling relaxed. And one example is that my husband, when he gets home from work at about 5:30, quarter to 6, he's exhausted and he wants to take, a 30-minute nap. And when I'm rushing around at that 6 o'clock hour, trying to figure out what to take out of the freezer and what to make, and, if I thought too much in the microwave, it's not going to come out right. And so by the time we sit down to eat, I'm sort of angry. Um, but yet the other days when I do sort of plan it out, um, sometimes when he's sitting there sleeping, I put the timer on and know that I now have 30 minutes just to myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So that's wonderful. Love to hear that. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you. Now we know that we can create some good habits that are good behaviors and, maybe spice up our life a little bit.
Depending on what recipe you're using.
You're right. You got it. Okay. Well, we want to thank everybody for listening to the Intentionality Gurus. Please go out to the website, www.intentionalitygurus.com, and join us on a future podcast.
Love to have them as guests.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Talk to you
Okay.
soon. Bye-bye.